The introduction. In the quiet town of Rainwood, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, shadows clung stubbornly to the edges of the culture. It was a picturesque place, with manicured lawns, cozy cafes, and the boisterous crackle of autumn leaves underfoot. I moved deliberately here, like the slow flow of the river that snaked through the center of town. Most days, the only disturbances came from the chatter of friends or the distant sounds of children playing. But on a particularly crisp evening, in late October, the tranquility would be shattered in ways unimagined. Eleanor Hastings, a well-respected librarian, hadn't shown up for her shift. To her co-workers, Eleanor was someone who exuded warmth and diligence, always ready with a book recommendation or a gentle smile. As the hours ticked by and her absence lingered like the fog rolling off the river, concern gave way to urgency. Panic spread through the dimly lit aisles of Rainwood Public Library as phone calls were made. Friends and family started to emerge from their homes, searching for the woman who had become the town's heartbeat. Yes, son. Hang on. What? The sky began to darken, presaging a storm that would soon roll over the town, adding a sense of foreboding to the already fraught atmosphere. What began as a whisper of concern quickly escalated into a loud cry for help as the first responders were alerted, and fateful decisions were made. This was the last evening for Eleanor Hastings, as they knew her a simple librarian, caught in the throes of a twisted reality that would change the town forever. The victim. Eleanor Hastings was an enigma wrapped in the familiar. At 52, she was a staple of the Rainwood community, her talents and passions interwoven into the very fabric of the town. Eleanor had dedicated over 20 years to the library, guiding both children and adults through the worlds woven within the pages of books. She possessed an innate ability to connect deeply with others. Her gentle laughter resonated in the minds of those lucky enough to experience. An only child, Eleanor had been raised by her grandparents after losing her parents in a tragic car accident when she was just a child. Their small Victorian house was filled with stories passed down through generations, instilling in her the values of compassion and kindness. While her friends ventured into careers, chasing promotions and accolades, Eleanor remained steadfast in her commitment to the written word, her life punctuated by the quiet joy of cataloging and sharing literature with others. But beneath that tranquil surface, Eleanor carried burdens unknown to most. Her own heartbreaks had unfurled into a veil of solitude, her failed marriages and brief romances flashing by like faded photographs. Even as her peers married and raised families, Eleanor lingered in that Victorian house filled with memories, finding solace in fiction. But lately, the library whispered of change. Excitement buzzed in the air. A major renovation was planned, promising new technology and opportunities to connect with the community in vibrant new ways. As the search for Eleanor intensified, the town couldn't help but reflect on how little they truly knew about her troubled past. Suspicion would soon unearth truths they were unprepared to face. The crime scene. As the early morning light broke through the clouds, illuminating the mist that hung over Rainwood, additional responders arrived at the Hastings residence. What? The air felt electric with unease as officers took in the unassuming Victorian home, its painted trim peeling and the shutters hanging slightly ajar. This was Eleanor's world, a safe haven that now resembled a crime scene, sending ripples of dread through the gathered crowd. Detective Daniel Carter, a seasoned investigator with years of experience in the field, stepped gingerly onto the porch. He'd seen countless cases, But the sight of an empty home belonging to a beloved community member was palpably unsettling. An onlooking neighbor stood quietly, arms folded, and brow furrowed. The curious murmurs of residents echoed in the street, framing the home in sorrowful whispers. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with a lingering bitterness, as if the walls themselves mourned. A family heirloom mirror reflected the scene, showing chipped edges and an unsettling stillness. Eleanor's life linear, a small purse with scriptures adorned, lay open on the coffee table, its contents chaotically spilled, revealing only fragments of her life. A half-finished cup of chamomile tea, meant for comfort, sat cold beside an open book. Detective Carter noted the unmistakable signs of struggle. Furniture had been knocked askew, a chair lay overturned, and a scarf was caught on a nail by the fireplace. A sense of urgency prickled at him. The clock was ticking. Whatever transpired in that seemingly safe space was not simply a disappearance, it was a violent rupture of order. As he surveyed the chaos, the detective realized they were not just searching for a missing person. They were piecing together a grisly puzzle, one that suggested Eleanor Hastings might be in more peril than either her friends or the police had anticipated. The early investigation. With the crime scene secured, Detective Carter and his team began the meticulous process of gathering evidence. The sunshine filtered through the smudged glass windows, contrasting starkly with the eerie silence inside the Hastings home. Crime scene technicians came and went, snapping photographs and collecting samples with careful precision. The air buzzed with the muted sounds of activity, punctuated only by the rustle of plastic evidence bags. The team soon turned their attention to Eleanor's recent activities. They scoured her calendar, finding appointments that hinted at possibilities in an art class with a friend, a book club meeting at the library, and a few cryptic notations that suggested she was working on a personal project. It was clear that, despite being a librarian, Eleanor lived a life brimming with unexpressed dreams. One of those dreams, however, would become critical to the investigation. As dusk settled over Rainwood, Carter interviewed those closest to her, starting with her longtime colleague, Claire Dawson. Claire was visibly shaken, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. She recounted Eleanor's enthusiasm about the upcoming renovation, a big event that would reshape the community's relationship with the library. Yet, Claire's memories were tinged with uncertainty, particularly regarding an unexpected challenge that had cropped up, a dark figure that had been seen loitering outside the library in the days leading up to Eleanor's disappearance. Rumors quickly surfaced, drawing attention to a string of petty thefts in the area. Neighbors whispered about graffiti and disturbances late at night. Carter made a note to follow up on these claims, realizing the connections were invaluable. For small-town dynamics, a few miscreants could create an atmosphere rife with fear, but larger, nefarious designs were often hidden beneath the surface. Could Eleanor have stumbled into something darker than the unassuming town had ever seen? The dead ends. Days passed into a week, and the once bustling streets of Rainwood grew eerily quiet. Detective Carter and his team sifted through leads that came like falling leaves, colorful, but ultimately transient. The town, once gripped by concern for Eleanor Hastings, displayed an unsettling impatience as hope started to fade. Each unfruitful lead felt like a heavy stone thrown into the depths of a still pond, rippling reflections of despair. Interviews with friends and acquaintances turned up scant evidence about Eleanor's whereabouts or state of mind, Claire Dawson had seen the distress that often clouded Eleanor's gaze, but when pressed, couldn't provide any substantial information. Another of Eleanor's friends revealed a confrontation with a local man, a transient often found near the library's entrance. But as the police pursued the lead, it quickly became clear that the man had a solid alibi. He had been part of a city program providing shelter for the homeless, fully able to account for his whereabouts. Clues began to dry up, and frustrations grew. Every brick uncovered simply revealed more questions beneath. Carter called the forensic team to examine Eleanor's belongings again. A simple scrap of paper hidden beneath the coffee table caught their attention. But its markings were cryptic, and indecipherable jumble of letters and numbers. Yet, it pulsed with potential. A whisper of a clue that could break the case wide open. As the leaves turned on the town's trees, so too did the resolve of the community. They organized candlelight vigils, yet the flickering flames reflected their mounting fears that Eleanor might never be found. A thought hung in the air: was it possible that Eleanor's life had been intertwined with shadows so deep that she had unknowingly sealed her own fate? A break in the case. As the days wore on without leads, Detective Carter felt the burden of the town's growing despair pressing against him. It was late on a Friday afternoon when a glimmer of hope arrived unexpectedly, a call from the forensic lab. The scrap of paper discovered in Eleanor's home had yielded new possibilities. A series of numbers was identified as coordinate points, linked to a specific location just outside town. Excitement and weariness clashed within him as Carter gathered his team. "We have a potential location," he asserted, urgency punctuating his voice. The coordinates led to an old mining site on the outskirts of Rainwood, a place long abandoned, yet rumored to hold secrets of its own. Decades ago, it had been bustling with activity before being left to nature's reclaim. Now, the site was known primarily among locals as an unkempt expanse of rusting machinery and dense overgrowth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Carter and a group of officers set out to investigate the area. Shadows deepened in the forest as they navigated uneven terrain festooned with tangled roots and brambles. Anxiety pulled tight in Carter's chest. What if they found something, anything that could indicate Eleanor's fate? After scouring the area for what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon an old shack near the mining site, boards rotting and walls drenched in shadow. Inside, the stench of decay filled their nostrils, and a glimmer of hope flickered. A discarded piece of fabric caught on a jagged metal fragment, unmistakably resembling Eleanor's scarf. The implications hit hard as they secured it as evidence. Pale under the eerie glow of flashlights, they called in the forensics team. As they worked to unearth the site, the air crackled with an unspoken tension. They were on the brink of uncovering a reality that was both desperately sought after and dreadfully feared. The suspect. The discovery at the mining site opened a floodgate of questions, revitalizing an investigation that had felt interminably stagnant. With the scarf securely in evidence and forensic analysis underway, Detective Carter directed the investigation toward persons of interest. The team meticulously combed through individuals who had been in frequent contact with Eleanor, and the idle whispers from the community began coalescing into names. One of those names belonged to Mark Reynolds, a local handyman who had worked sporadically for Eleanor over the years. Known for his charm and quick smile, Mark's seemingly harmless demeanor masked an unsettling presence. For some, he was a friend, but for others there was unease. He had a penchant for lingering too long during conversations and often appeared where he wasn't needed. Neighbors whispered about him, claiming that he had a thing for Eleanor, but no firm claims. When questioned, his alibi wavered. He claimed to have been at a bar in town, nursing drinks and swapping stories with acquaintances, but none could concretely confirm his presence. With a growing sense of distrust, Carter brought Mark in for a formal interview, his gut instinct screaming that something was amiss. As they sat across from one another in the interrogation room, Mark's charm turned to furtive glances and nervous fidgeting. Carter probed into his relationship with Eleanor, watching as Mark's demeanor shifted. Initially, he spoke of her kindness, but soon faltered, his voice breaking slightly as defensive assertions flew out, accusations of overreaching from the officers and claims that he had been misunderstood. With each slip, Carter felt the weight of suspicion settle squarely on Mark's shoulders. The unease growing within the room turned palpable, yet the detective knew that they needed to tread carefully. A crack in Mark's facade could lead them to the truth of what had happened to Eleanor Hastings. The trial. The seeds of rumor had blossomed into a cacophony of speculation. Would justice prevail, or would the truth remain shrouded in darkness? As the trial commenced, the air around Rainwood was charged with a mix of dread and anticipation, every local news outlet reporting incessantly on the proceeding. Detective Carter took a seat near the front, acutely aware of the weight of the community's gaze fixated on the fraying edges of the case. Her once jubilant facade now replaced by a mask of anxiety. The prosecution characterized him as a man who couldn't accept rejection, who had crossed an insurmountable boundary when he acted upon his fixation with Eleanor. They vividly painted the timeline leading to her disappearance, laying out evidence piece by damning piece. Witness testimonials rang through the courtroom, friends recounting Eleanor's fears regarding Mark's unwelcome advances and his constant self-invitation to her home. Forensic evidence linking him to the scarf found at the mining site corroborated the prosecution's arguments, though Mark maintained his innocence, claiming he had never meant to threaten her. The defense attempted to dismantle the prosecution's narrative, introducing witnesses who painted him as a benign figure, casting doubts on Eleanor's perceived fears by suggesting she could have been involved in other conflicts or risky encounter. As days turned into weeks, tension simmered. The courtroom, once echoing with lively debate, slowly morphed into a crucible of emotional outbursts. Family members of Eleanor, wedged into tight clusters, wore sorrow and determination on their faces, fueled by a dogged desire for closure. In the closing statements, Detective Carter found himself reflecting on the toll the case had taken on Rainwood, a town now under the throes of collective trauma. When the jury finally came back with a verdict, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Heads bowed, hearts racing. The trial concluded with a decision that would ripple through the town, a reflection of their search for justice that had, at last, found a voice. The aftermath. As the gavel fell and the verdict reverberated through the room, Rainwood was left grappling with its new reality. The echoes of the trial seemed to linger in the air long after the courtroom doors shut behind him. Mark Reynolds was found guilty, but the sense of relief was clouded by a deeper sorrow of community now existed in the shadow of a tragedy that had claimed one of its own. Eleanor's absence hung heavily over the town as residents turned inward, confronting the fear that lurked beneath their seemingly idyllic lives. The library, once a haven of stories and laughter, stood quiet and forlorn, its windows fogged with the residue of lingering grief. Claire Dawson took up the mantle of leading community programs, determined to honor Eleanor's memory by re-establishing the space as a beacon of connection. Yet haunting questions remained for many. How could they have not seen the sun? How could Eleanor's kindness have turned into a target? Detective Carter, too, replayed the investigation in his mind, scrutinizing missed opportunities and overlooked information. Living and healing didn't come easy, and the weight of responsibility clung to him, impacting his own relationships within the community. Candlelight vigils turned into support groups as townsfolk began to share their experiences with fear and vulnerability. In the vibrant autumn leaves, they found solace within their shared pain, recognizing that in uniting, they could build a stronger, more aware community. Artifacts testifying to Eleanor's life, a collection of her favorite books found a place on a new display at the library, serving as reminders and inspiration for future generations. As winter approached, the atmosphere softened, and slowly but surely, the fractures began to heal. Carter knew the scars would remain, shaping the fabric of Rainwood's identity. The lessons drawn from Eleanor Hastings' tragic end instilled a newfound vigilance, helping them protect the quiet beauty that once defined their town. Reflection. As winter settled over Rainwood, the stark landscape seemed to mirror the community's journey toward healing. Snow blanketed the ground, silencing the remaining echoes of pain and grief, allowing space for quiet reflection. Detective Carter often found himself wandering the library, still grappling with the memories of humdrum interviews, haunting scenes, and the solemn faces of Eleanor's friends. The weight of the case lingered around him like the crisp chill in the air. It was a companion he could not shake. Settling into a corner once frequented by Eleanor, he thumbed through one of her favorite novels, each page whispering tales of resilience and hope. In the stories she adored, characters faced insurmountable challenges, embodying strength that sometimes matched humanity's absurd fragility. The juxtaposition resonated deeply within him. Life was a patchwork of joy and sorrow, boundless love and consuming loss. His thoughts drifted to the people of Rainwood, now entwined in a collective narrative shaped by compassion, vigilance, and care. What was once an idyllic community had been jolted into awareness, fostering new bonds forged through shared experience. Eleanor's legacy lived on through every voice raised in unison against violence, every kindness passed between neighbors, and every page turned in the library where her spirit still lingered. As snowflakes drifted softly from the sky, he too sought solace, finding peace in knowing that from tragedy, the town had grown, committed to ensuring that no one would again slip silently into shadow.